Okay. Hi, I'm Karen Creviston,
And I'm Amarjae Carter.
and we will be presenting on the feminist and constructivism theories of international relations. Before we get into each of those, we'd like to say that they both challenge the standard international relation paradigms, such as realism and liberalism, and they are both postmodernist theories.
Okay, so for constructivism, neither objects, such as states or concepts, anarchy, have any necessary fixed or objective meaning. Rather, their meanings are constructed through social interaction. Constructivism is the power of ideas, discourse, culture, and language, and they are as important as material sources of power. Constructivism assumes that the individual elites and cultures are the main actors in the system. I mean, states act from their reality, and state identities and interests are based on these social structures. The states' reactions to each other are a social construction. There is no fixed meaning in the international system, and the way states interact is socially constructed. So this goes against realism. Constructivism has emphasis on the impact of ideas, language, culture, and society, and the international system can change. They believe that the international system can change. It is better at describing the past rather than anticipating the future. In practice, the modern concept of sovereignty can mean, or it means that now, if a state is involved in major human rights violations such as genocide, the United Nations Security Council can say that they have the right to protect and can send peacekeepers into the country.
Okay. So then next, I will be covering the feminism theory. So it seeks to explore how we think or do not think about gender in international relations, as we are typically not thinking about it. And as we'll discuss later, that international relations has no gender at the moment. Um, Traditional IR has avoided thinking of men and women as socially constituted subject categories, meaning that there is no men and women in international relations. And feminism also points to exclusions and biases of mainstream international relations. Feminism wants to make women more visible as both social, economic, political subjects in the international politics. It also aims to analyze how gender inequalities are embedded into the day-to-day practices of international relations. Feminists are attempting to move from an ungendered analysis of IR to a now gendered analysis, just meaning that they would like to include women in the analysis of international relations. They also believe that the world would be more just and prosperous if women were able to play a larger role in the international sphere. Um, the criticism of the feminist theory is that it can be challenging to accept their ideas due to the lack of scientific methodology in feminism. So, feminism, unlike other things like liberalism or realism, does not have scientific methodology in their theories. And then they also point out that women's rights are normally seen under local understanding and definitions rather than a universal one. So, there's a masculine nature to the universal understandings of international relations. Lastly, I'd like to point out that they argue that social discourses have been dominated by men and that the exclusion of women affects the questions being asked and the answers to those questions. Basically, just covering that international relations as a whole excludes women, and this affects the answers and the way that we are looking at international relations entirely. So next, we're going to get into our three examples. We have one example for constructivism, and then the last two will be for feminism. So to start with our example of constructivism, we're going to be discussing the norms and discourses in climate change. One of the main examples that we came up for of this was the Paris Accord. We felt that it reflects global discourse and is a social construction rather than material and self-interest, like in realism. We just feel that climate change issues, as states work together in that way, and it's like a cultural thing as living on Earth and caring about the environment, kind of illustrates constructivism, especially as often working to battle climate change is not the best thing to do for a state economically, which would contradict working in their best self-interest, like realism would want to say that they would want to do. So then for our examples of the feminist theory, the first we have is war's impact on women. So war's effect on women is often overlooked, as many things are about women in the international sphere. Women often face displacement, sexual violence, and high death rates in war, which is just not covered in political science and is often not researched on. The UN recently found, as of 2023, the effects of war and conflict on women and girls are actually worsening. Uh, Women are excluded from post-war negotiations as well, and women are just left out of politics on the international level. I feel like this last part about women being excluded from post-war negotiations illustrates the idea that I earlier mentioned, that the feminist theory finds that if women were included in international relations, that the world could be more just and prosperous.
Okay, our last example on feminism is going to be in regards to women in the workplace. There are extreme pay gaps between women and men in the workplace, which affects international relations. So here in the US, women are still only earning roughly 83 cents for every dollar earned by men. And this really illustrates how social discourse is dominated by men, according to the feminist theory. Women and girls make up half of the world's population. However, in most countries, women are underrepresented in the political process at the national level. In 2024, women only hold 27% of the legislative seats around the world. They are excluded from international relations because of the underrepresentation. And women's position in the workplace contributes to their role or lack thereof in international politics.
All right. Thank you so much. That is the end of our presentation.